fight or flight is not always a physical reaction. And I did an article on this, and so I'm just going to jump right in. You think of fight or flight response as something physical. Like if you're out camping and you hear a rustle in the forest, you will either like just run off or you'll prepare for like physical battle. So that's essentially fight or flight. You will either be down for whatever, or you're just like, I'm going, I'm not dealing with this, I'm out. I will give you two examples, and one of these is in the article that I wrote. When my second husband and I, when we were looking for our house to buy, we were walking outside, and the realtor was with us, and where we were walking was in between two trees. Well, actually, it was like a line of trees, which actually was the boundary line between our house and the house next door to us. And I heard thump, thump, and I like ducked down and put my hands over my head, and I'm like crouched down and I'm looking, and I looked over the realtor, he's just like looking at me, and my husband, he's just like, what's wrong with you? But I'm still like ducked down, like I was crouched down like next to a tree like this, like looking around like, what is this? And it turned out to be squirrels were up in the trees and they were dropping down nuts. And so the thump that I kept hearing was the nuts hitting the ground. And I realized that I had, it was a trigger reaction. I grew up in the inner city. And so I would hear gunshots and things like that. And so I was always just, growing up, I was kind of just like, oh my gosh, what is that? Am I going to get hit by a bullet? You hear something, you duck, you cover your head and all of that. And people think that reaction is from when I was in the military. I'm like, no, that's when I grew up, in the inner city, in the ghetto, in the hood. And so, but it's a similar thing. Some people come home from the war, they hear cars backfire and they're just like, oh my gosh. And, they're having this reaction. And it startled me to realize that sound from 30 plus years ago would still have an effect on me. And so it was eye-opening for me to realize that something from back then that I hadn't thought about since then, I still had a reaction to that. I was still triggered by just hearing that sound. And so we made it into a joke, and we ended up, when we tell that story, we'd be like, oh, the suicidal bomber squirrels, throwing down, stuff to hit me with. But so that's a reaction, and you may have a reaction to something and not realize it until something triggers it, and then you're like, what is this? Like, what's going on? Another situation, and this was, I think, probably in like 1998 or 1999, we were camping, and I'm laughing because I'm just like, this is just crazy. And it was dark, and so we had our chairs by the campfire, and we had a tarp up because it was rainy that day. And so we were just sitting there and talking and telling stories and laughing. All of a sudden, we hear like snap, crackle, crackle. And so I looked over like this, and Lisa was on this side of me. True story, and that is really her name. She was on this side of me, and there were like 3 other people on this side. And one of the guys was on the other side of Lisa. So I heard like a, crackle, crunch, crunch. And so I'm like looking, and I thought maybe it was just me. But then I saw Lisa, and her chair was like leaning over towards me, and she like kind of grabbed my arm. And so I grabbed her arm, and we're both just like in slow motion, just like, what is this? And then the guys were still talking, like her and I were the only ones that were like, what is this sound? And then I saw a boot appear from like behind the tarp, because the tarp was angled, and so the boot was coming here, and we were like, ah! It turned out to be a ranger. He was like, oh, there's been noise complaints, blah 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 blah. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like I was about to have a fit. And and her and I were just like, what is this? And so that was another incident, something very recently. This was probably a couple weeks ago. One of my walking buddies and I were at the park, and the trail or the track, whatever you want to call it, it's about 6 feet apart. So she's on one side, I'm on the other side, and people come up, if they're walking faster than you, then they'll go around you or you go around them or whatever. People on bikes, they're like, on your left, on your right, whatever. And so I'm walking and I'm on one side, she's on the other side. I hear something rustling in the grass, and I jump like this. And this guy says, "Oh, you're good," and he's on a bike and goes by, and I'm like, "You're saying I'm good, like you were not about to be good," like in my mind, because if he was closer I would have hit him. So I was just like and so I was thinking about these examples with the fight or flight. Like the ducking was like a flight when I heard, the nuts dropping, thinking I was hearing gunfire in the woods back in '99 camping. That was a flight because I was like ready to run. But this situation, like I was like ready to fight this dude or whatever it was. I had no idea like what this noise was that I heard next to me. And so that got me thinking of how fight or flight is not always a physical reaction. Sometimes it's a psychological reaction. And it's about how if we feel threatened in any way, whether physically or emotionally, we may still have that same reaction, that fight or flight reaction. I'm going to link an article below, and I also have it in my article that I'm going to post on my website that I forget the person's name, I don't have it here in front of me, but they also added freeze. So there's fight, flight, or freeze, and they say freeze is when your mind is trying to figure out which way it's going to go, which for me, freeze is also a flight reflex, because whether you run or you stand still, if you're not consciously doing something to resolve or deal with that issue, you're still frozen. You're frozen in that moment. And freezing up is your mind's way, in my opinion, is your mind's way of just kind of checking out and, okay, I'm not going to deal with this. I'm going to pretend this isn't happening. I'm going to distract myself with other things. We're just going to pretend that this problem doesn't exist. And so that's what this video is essentially about, is that you have to decide what is your natural reflex. And it is a learned behavior. We learn it as children. When something traumatizes us or there's a problem, depending on how others are around us, that determines, okay, are we going to fight situations, whether it's in our mind, whether it's something mental that we need to confront and work on resolving, or are we just going to not deal with this issue? As a kid, I learned to just disregard things because I didn't feel supported. I had a troublesome childhood. I was emotionally and physically neglected. And so that taught me to just not deal with things or just dismiss things. However, as an adult, I've learned, and also through, education and through my job, I do have a doctorate degree in psychology. And so a lot of times when I'm saying things, I am speaking from personal experience and also my clinical background. So I'm not just this person on here that's just making up stuff. It's based on my clinical work and how what I've learned clinically affects my life. And so being a clinician, even though I'm now retired, the things I've learned, I've also applied to my personal life. It wasn't like, okay, I'm going to learn this and help somebody else. Like, first help yourself. Just like if you're on an airplane, if the oxygen masks come down, you put yours on first before you help someone else. Like, you have to be okay in order to even attempt to make sure someone else is okay, or you're both going to be in a bad situation. This is where I'm coming from with these videos. And so even though they're sounding personal, my hope is to help someone with my story, with my experience, and also giving some clinical opinions on different things. Because relationships are hard. Dealing with your own issues are hard. Dealing with someone else's issues are hard. And my goal is to help you be as healthy as possible so that you can have healthy friendships and relationships. And so what I realized is that you do have a tendency one way or the other. Either your mindset is, okay, I'm going to deal with this and I'm going to find a resolution to it. I'm going to try to find, some ways to solve this issue, which is fighting, even if it's mental. If you realize there's something about yourself that you don't like I realized I need to be transparent the same way I want people to be transparent with me. So my mental fight is I need to acknowledge I need to be transparent. And when I find myself in situations with other people, I need to work on being more transparent. That's the fight. The flight would be, I know if I talk to this person, I know we'll get through this. However, I'm not going to talk to this person. I'll just let things stay the way they are. That's flight because you're not dealing with it. Or it's freeze where you're still in this situation with this person, but you've acknowledged in yourself that I'm not going to work on making this better. I'm going to just let things be however they're going to be. So whether you're fleeing the situation or you're freezing in a situation, you're still emotionally in the same place because you're not dealing with the issue, which means you're not going to grow as a person. And so I want to just encourage you, if you do have a tendency to flee and not work on issues, to work on that. And the key, I think, is finding a healthy support system. Therapists, I'm always talking about, get a therapist, or if you don't have someone that can be objective and talk to you and help you, someone that you're comfortable with being transparent with, then, find a therapist. And every therapist is not a good fit. So if you go to one and you feel like it's not helping, or you're feeling like, I can't really open up to this person, or I'm afraid to open up to this person, then it's okay to find another therapist or someone else to talk to. Like, that's okay. And so I don't want you to feel like, there's just this one person that's going to fit for you. That's why there's different therapists, because different therapists have different techniques. They do things different ways. They have different approaches. Some are more maternal. Some are more, okay, this is what you say the issue is. We want to deal with this. You're not going to waste my time sitting here and not getting to the heart of things. And so it is about finding a good fit. And I will challenge you that if you find a therapist and you do feel like they're nudging you a little bit or pushing you just a little bit, and they should not be pushing too hard. However, if they are nudging you and pushing you, I can almost guarantee you it's because they think that you can handle it, and they see growth in you and they see potential in you to grow past that issue, and they're trying to nudge you in that direction. I don't think anyone will just push you way past your comfort level just for the sake of being an asshole. We are taught to discuss what the client wants to talk about. So even if we know that there's an issue that you brought up before, and you come in this week and you say, well, I just want work's been good. This happened at work, that happened at work. There's still this underlying issue. And so for me and for other therapists I know, we're like, yeah, I'm glad you had a good work week. I would like to revisit something you said a couple weeks ago when you said such and such. And so I was wondering if we can talk about that. And so that's perfectly fine. And sometimes that's necessary because people will tend to talk about the feel-good things and not want to discuss the things that are troublesome, even though it's already out there that, I'm here for this issue, but yet they still really don't want to talk about the issue. So if you have a therapist who is nudging you in that direction, be open. And if you're not comfortable with that therapist, then find another therapist. And also, don't be quick to write therapists off, because I call them growing pains. When you start to learn about yourself and you are making a conscious effort to fight those negative emotions and feelings, and you're striving to find actual resolutions and how to better process things that have happened and to resolve, different types of trauma and abuse that has happened in your life, it's going to hurt. And so that's why I call them growing pains. And then you're at a crossroads of, okay, am I going to fight and keep going this way to be a better person? Or am I going to freeze or flee and continue ignoring this situation and just stay stuck where I am? And so if you are making progress in therapy and you really are dealing with your past issues or even current issues, and you may start to feel like, oh, this therapist is really pushing me and I don't like this, don't quit. Do not give up on yourself. And that happened to someone I know. I encouraged him to go into therapy. He was growing a lot. He was learning a lot about himself. After a few months, he was like, oh, I'm not liking my therapist anymore. And I knew that he was at a crossroads, because he was at a point where he was just so uncomfortable. Even though he was able to say the positive things that he was learning about himself and how he was allowing people to abuse him, even though he knew it wasn't good, because he just didn't want to be alone. So he tolerated a lot of things that were not healthy. And so even though he learned a lot of things about himself and realized a lot of things about himself in his past relationships and even his family relationships, he got to a point where he was like, I don't think I want to keep doing this. And I told him, I said, don't quit. Don't stop. You're at a place where you are really growing, and either you're going to continue growing or you're not. And he opted to not. And I told him, I said, I really feel like you gave up on yourself, because all of those positive things that you notice about yourself and all the positive changes that you've even noticed about yourself and in your life, now you're quitting. And so I found it really unfortunate that he did give up on himself. And I'm just sharing that story to say that it is hard. And that's why I always say it is important to have a healthy support system and to push yourself. And if you're okay with having someone hold you accountable, have someone hold you accountable and check in on you. Be like, hey, you know, how are you doing in this area? How are you doing in that area? The point I'm trying to get across is don't give up on being a better you. Once you've acknowledged that there are things that you need to work on them. Work on them. It's hard work. You know, journal your feelings. Something I like about journaling is when you look back and read it, you can see your growth through your words and through situations. And so that's something that I am a fan of. And I think I'm going to end this video here. So fight or flight is not always a physical reaction. Sometimes it is an emotional reaction. When you know that there's an issue that needs to be worked on, are you going to fight? Meaning, are you going to seek a resolution? Are you going to acknowledge this issue and then be like, okay, what can I do to overcome this? What can I do to be better? What can I do to better manage this if this trigger comes up again in the future? Or are you going to flee and be like, this problem doesn't exist. I'm not going to deal with it. I'm just going to go about my day-to-day life as if this isn't a problem. And as you know from watching my other video, if you did watch it, when you ignore problems or don't deal with them, they're not going to go away. And they're going to continue to come up. And so I want you all to be emotionally healthy. And you need to be in order to have healthy relationships and friendships. All of us, I'm not going to say all of us because I don't know all of us, but I would venture to say that the majority of us have had bad situations happen in our lives. Doesn't matter what age you are. I'm 50. I mean, I have a host of stories I could tell. But we've all been through things, and that's the key, is been through. If you're still here, then you've gone through it. It may still be up here, and that's what you need to process and deal with. And so I just want to leave you with this. Like, don't give up on yourself. Don't give up on being a better person. Fight for your mental health. Fight to be an emotionally stable person, an emotionally mature, and an emotionally intellectual person. And it'll be worth it. It's hard work, but it's worth it. Because when you see growth in yourself and you can look back and say, well, last year, like, this thing, like, really, really bothered me. And this year, something came up that triggered me and reminded me of that, but I'm okay. Like, I'm not broken down. I'm not upset. It's just like, huh. And that's a sign of growth as well, is when you're triggered by something, you're just like, huh, okay. Or like when I'm ducking from the nuts falling from the tree and then I could laugh about it. It's just like, oh my gosh, like that was so stupid. And they're looking at me like, why is she ducking on the ground? Like, there's just squirrels in the tree. But I'm hearing a thump thinking I'm hearing gunfire. True story, but I was just like, whoa. And so we can be triggered by things and not realize that it's still a thing. And the goal is once you realize it's a thing, like, deal with that. And I had to think about, okay, why did I think that was gunfire? Like, I'm not even in that same neighborhood. I'm not even in that same state. I'm in a good neighborhood. I'm in a good environment. This is a nice, you know, place, and very safe place, and very homey place, and comfortable, and all your neighbors know each other. Almost every street was a cul-de-sac, so whoever was going through there lived there, so there was really no through traffic. So there was no danger, is what I'm saying. But hearing that sound, it took me right back to when I was in the hood. And so that's something to think about too, is when you're triggered by something, think about the situation. Is this the same situation? Am I still walking down this street in the projects where people are like pulling out guns and shooting over drugs and kidnapping kids out of cars and shooting people's dogs and somebody selling their diapers, you know, for drugs or something like that? Am I in that situation? No, I wasn't. And so it's being able to differentiate between, okay, that was there, this is here. Even though that sound or that situation triggered me, pause and think, am I really in danger? No. And then just, you know, move on from there. And so that's it for this video. I hope this made sense. If you like this content, you know, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and And thank you for being here, and you will see me in the next video. Bye.